my son, he's an amazing, amazing child. He's very bright. He's very kind and gentle. He has a full functioning IEP. He has a social emotional disorder. And so it's not a learning disability per se, but it affects his learning or his ability to learn and to be present in school, in the general way that school works, in this sort of typical way that we see it happening for every student. And so we've been working really hard to get him different accommodations that would work for his learning style and for his preferences. It's been a real fight.
Now, you talked earlier about one of the things that kept you where you are now is diversity within the school system, but it's my understanding that your son is probably the only person of color in his class. Is that correct? And how has race played into some of these challenges that you face?
The student population is diverse. I think it's 54% minority, which is big, but it's not mostly, I'd say, brown students, people of color. It's more like we have a very big Cape Verdean population. We have a very big Asian population. We have a very big Indian population. We have a lot of international families here because of the universities that are in this town. But the group that my son belongs to is a very small group. And so I still feel as though he feels singled out at times. He feels different. Also, just in terms of his disability, he wonders why he's not like the rest of the kids, why he needs to leave. To make it like a comparative measure, we did spend a year living in Springfield at one point because that is where I work. So we did try moving there for a year, and he did go to school there for a year, and we had a completely different experience. And their school system is completely minority students, like the entire district. There were no Caucasian students in his entire school. And so he had a completely different experience there, a more feeling of inclusion, not feeling singled out in the classroom, not feeling like his behaviors were making him different than everybody else. And I think just also his life experiences, because I do work and I do have a fairly good job, but I grew up in poverty, and I'm raising my children in poverty. And so it's a completely different experience than the other children in this town, because this is a very wealthy town. And so you do have a lot of students who come from a lot, and they have a lot of resources, and they have a lot of extra helps that my son doesn't have. And it just, he really feels it, and it really affects his self-esteem and his momentum when he's in school, because there are a lot of things, like even small things, like why does he have more resources than I have? Like, why does he have more notebooks, more pencils? Like, why, when I break things, I don't have a new one right away? Like, those things set him really far back in terms of being focused on learning.
Can you amplify a little bit more this issue of how he's treated by the educators? I mean, how do you believe they view him, not because of some of his needs, but because of the color of his skin?
I think those things, because of the color of his skin, those things are really closely tied together. And so I think that that even if he were a white student and he had an IEP and he had some of the same challenges, it still wouldn't be the same outcome because of how he's viewed. And so I think when he has instances or behavioral issues, I think he's viewed as frightening and as a threat, and as we need to get him out of the classroom. We need to separate him from the students. We need to keep him away from the classroom. Like, these things are continuously happening. And at first I thought it was like a normal response, and that this must be the best that they can do, or this must be protocol. However, when we moved to Springfield, that was not the case. And I think that behavior and perception of behavior and just cultural competency plays a big role in how you view someone's actions. And so when he does something that appears to be a little bit more aggressive, or if he gets really upset and like pushes something, that's very alarming, and that's taken. Teachers here see that as a threat, but teachers in Springfield didn't perceive that as a threat. And I think it has a lot to do with his race and how that perception of him as a human, and then how that ties into his behaviors and how they are displayed.
How does that kind of reaction by educators impact his learning?
He completely shuts down. And so I know that's also part of his learning curve that's different than everyone else's, but he's very hard on himself. And so he thrives when he's succeeding. And if he feels like he's doing wrong, or if he's not succeeding, or if he's different, like significantly different than everybody else, he gets sort of stuck and in a place where he's just looking at himself as, what is wrong with me? Like, why am I like this? And he can't, it's very hard to direct him, to redirect him in a different direction and turn it into a positive, well, how can we work on this? Or what can we do differently? He just doesn't process those things that way. He processes them as, there's something wrong with me and I can't do this and I'm a failure. And I know this because he says these things when these things happen. My son is very vocal and he's very good at communicating what his feelings are and what he's going through. And he will tell you in that moment. And I do know that he communicates that to his teachers, that like, I don't understand what's wrong with me, or why this is happening to me, or why you guys are treating me like this, or why I have to be separate from my classroom. And so I think they really cut the learning that can happen in the classroom, because like last year, we didn't have much progress because we spent most of the year trying to figure out how to make him feel included. And I just don't, like, that should already be a thing when he steps into the classroom on the first day. That shouldn't be something that we need to work on the entire year.
So how do you combat this issue of whether it's racism? How first of all, what do you classify it? What do you call it, number one, and how do you combat it?
I mean, it is racism. It is definitely racism, but I think that within the school system, racism displays in so many different kinds of ways. And I think one of the biggest things, I think for me, or that I've noticed with my child, is language. And so I make meetings with the teachers and with the principal and with the superintendent, and I try to speak with them about what I've noticed with my child and make suggestions, because saying things like, if you don't do this, you're going to have to leave the classroom, or if you're behaving in this way, I'm going to have to kick you out, doesn't encourage my child to behave. It doesn't encourage my child to stay. It doesn't make him feel like he's wanted in the classroom. And so like even just small things, we're changing the language that you use and saying things like, what can we do to help you right now, because we want you to stay inside the classroom. Like, we want you to be available for learning, and just being really connected with the students, being really open. So I regularly check in with the teachers. What kind of language are you using with my child? Because language really matters. What subjects are you going over when this happens? What are the topics? Because I know, not specifically for my child yet, but I know this has been an issue in the school system for children when they are learning about topics that have to do with African American history, that they feel like the questions are directed at them, or that everyone in the class is wondering what their perspective is on it, and just having them not feel like the token child, or the one to ask when things go wrong, or the one to look at if there's something wrong, or like, this must be because your child did this. Like, just not making the fault fall on them. I think I've been trying to work with the school on this.